Football Strategy Guide. This is Paul Miller. We are here with Brian Christiana and Parker Rose. Parker and Brian, welcome back to the podcast here in Season 3, Episode 2.
Oh, I'm looking forward for today's episode, Professor Miller.
Thank you, my friend, as always.
You know, this is a very interesting time because so we are doing this monthly, and we are looking forward to coming back to you once each month. So the last time you heard from us, it was our preseason look, and now we have a couple of weeks to take a look at what has been going on so far. Lots of major things happen in Week 2, and we're going to start off at the top with some of the most important news. Ben Roethlisberger out for the year, Parker. Thoughts?
Old age. He's at the age he can't take the hits no more. And after the sack he took, it was a nasty sack. And when he was throwing the ball, you could tell he was in serious pain. But injuries happen. Now it's time for Mason Rudolph to step up. And hopefully maybe he might be the future for the Steelers franchise as a quarterback.
Ben Roethlisberger in basically a game and a quarter. 3 fantasy points. That's pretty incredible. Even Mason Rudolph in his basically second half that he played has more points than Ben this season. He didn't look good before the injury. What does that mean in a general sense? I know that we're talking fantasy here, but what does that mean in a general sense, Parker, for the Steelers as a franchise going forward?
Honestly, they're in trouble. And thinking about it right now, for how bad they are. Like, the wide receiver core is not on the same page. We got a lot of young guys on the line's not focusing. Defense isn't focusing. And it's at the point now, if the Steelers have a really bad season, I think the Mike Tomlin era in Pittsburgh is going to be over.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, we were talking off air, Parker, and I wanted to bring this up, and I don't mean to steal your thunder for a future segment, but you actually believe Mason Rudolph might be a good pickup for Week 2.
Absolutely. He came in the second half and put up points. Like, yes, he threw a pick, but I don't think that was personally his fault. I think that was Dante Moncrief's fault. But after that pick, Mason Rudolph led a drive that the Steelers almost ended up, after leading at the half and blowing the lead, they almost came back and beat the Seahawks, who played a heck of a game too. So kudos to the Seahawks' offense, defense, and Coach Pete Carroll for playing a really good game, coming on the road and getting the victory.
James Conner also left that game with an injury, and we are recording this Monday, so we aren't necessarily going to talk about the Monday Night Football matchup. We might get some further clarity on some of these injuries. Any word on Conner?
I read this morning that it's his knee, and I think they said about an MRI, if I'm not mistaken. But if Conner gets sidelined for a bit, that's a big blow to the Steelers' run game. Like, don't get me wrong, they got Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell in the backfield if they need it, but James Conner is a talented running back, and after losing Ben, now if you lose Conner, now the Steelers' offense is in really, really bad trouble.
As of our recording, no news yet, but remember, Conner did miss 3 games last season with a knee injury, so we hope that is not going to be something that's bad. Obviously, Brian, fantasy football is part of what it is navigating injuries. Another major injury yesterday, Drew Brees. You said that you have him in a couple of leagues. What are you doing with him? So I just read up to 6 weeks. Obviously, I wouldn't imagine you're going to drop Brees, but where are you looking to potentially find a backup quarterback for Brees?
Well, I would definitely keep him on, like you said, keep him on the bench. You can't get rid of a guy like Drew Brees, who Parker did say, your MVP. So I'm not gonna get rid of him, but I'm gonna look at a guy, we talked about it again off air, like Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm a firm believer of Marcus Mariota. People are really high on Jameis Winston. I'm still not feeling the heat there. One game doesn't really do anything.
Neither of his games were even good.
Yeah.
Even he put up a few more points this time, but it really still wasn't that good. Now, here's my question to you, Brian. What are your thoughts on Bridgewater? Because Bridgewater didn't look great, but he didn't look terrible. And in that high-powered offense, you would think he could have some fantasy value. Did go 17 of 30 for 165 in relief and only 2 rushes. Thoughts on Bridgewater going forward?
Again, I think having Teddy Bridgewater, he's probably one of the best backups in the NFL. I mean, this guy made the Pro Bowl in 2016 with the Vikings. So, I mean, it's not a bad person to have on your team. But looking ahead, I mean, the schedule the Saints have, I know they're going to Jerry World in a couple. No, Dallas is going to New Orleans. But I mean, their schedule doesn't look any
at
great.
Seattle, home for Dallas, home for Tampa Bay, at Jacksonville, at Chicago. So you have to think more than likely, just looking at it through here, if they're talking 6 weeks, they have their bye in the 7th week. So it would probably make sense for him not to be back to week 10. So at at Seattle, home for Dallas, home for Tampa Bay, those defenses don't scare you. But at Jacksonville, at Chicago, they're playing 3 really tough defenses on the road there. What I would think that you would maybe consider with Bridgewater is maybe stream him for that maybe Dallas, Tampa, and Arizona game. But the 3 road games, I would stay far, far away from Bridgewater.
Alvin Kamara didn't really have that great of a week.
And I think we'll talk about that here in a minute.
Yeah.
Here's my secondary concern with Bridgewater. Taysom Hill. Hill actually got a lot more run as a quarterback in the game after Brees went out. I wonder how much that really impacts. I don't think it impacts Brees' value too much. I do think it might impact Bridgewater's, though. But I honestly will be one of these people who did lose Ben in a league that I might think about throwing a dart at Bridgewater in that offense. Not to say he's as good as Brees, but they have a heck of an offense.
Yeah. Another quarterback I have my eye on is the backup for Jacksonville. Because of Nick Foles, they signed Nick Foles that deal. Nick Foles goes down with that broken collarbone, and the backup,
Gardner Minshew.
When he came in, he put up some points, and I didn't see his stats from this week, but I would consider looking at him.
23-33, 213, 1 touchdown but he did also have 6 carries, 56 yards, and 16 fantasy points.
And that's not bad for a backup. Like a rookie coming out of the rookie class, seeing him develop into a quarterback, I would not overlook him if you need a quarterback.
I think that's a very interesting point. All right, speaking of which, we're going to go right into quarterbacks, and things have changed immensely. Obviously, Roethlisberger, Brees, definite top 10, well, I don't want to say definite, but certainly in the conversation for top 10 quarterbacks. I think some things have drastically changed. Let's start off with I'll tell you what. We'll talk about our top 10 here, and then maybe we'll see where we come in with some of these, and we can have some discussions. Brian, go ahead with your top 10 for quarterbacks.
All righty. I put Lamar Jackson at number 1 with how he's leading Baltimore. Mahomes, number 2. My guy, Dak Prescott, at 3. I put Tom Brady in there as well at number 4. Russell Wilson made my list. Carson Wentz, Josh Allen from Buffalo. Didn't really have the hottest of games, but Rivers still makes it because of how important he is to his team. So I had him in there. I did put Matthew Stafford in there, though.
I think that's a good point. Stafford's looked great thus far. In fantasy points, he's coming in at number 7 thus far. I'm curious your thoughts on Lamar Jackson over Mahomes. I think
it's all because of surprise at this point. I do like what Lamar Jackson's doing with who he has compared to Patrick Mahomes. Don't get me wrong, Tyreek Hill is hurt. But with having a rookie as your number 1, I don't think a lot of people even knew who Mark Andrews was before this season.
No, I definitely agree. But Brian, to say that Mahomes wouldn't be your number 1 quarterback, to me, is a stretch. 378, 3 touchdowns against Jacksonville. 443, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions on the season against Oakland. Now, again, we are talking Oakland here, and Jacksonville's not all that great. And I would imagine we're going to find out a little bit more about Mahomes because they do play Baltimore in week 3. However, they do have some easy games in terms of defenses coming up at Detroit, Indianapolis, Houston, and then they don't really play a tough defense till week 7 at Denver. I'm really surprised you went with Lamar Jackson here, 1 over Mahomes. I would have to agree with Rivers. I was really disappointed yesterday on the Chargers' effort, and certainly from someone such as myself and Parker, who called the Chargers going to the Super Bowl. Definitely a surprise how poorly they looked against Detroit in a 13-10 defeat in Week 2. Mike Williams was questionable, game-time decision, did catch a few passes, but I'll tell you, I was very let down by Rivers, and I've actually dropped him all the way out of my top 10. Parker, what are your thoughts on your top 10 at quarterback?
Well, number 1, we just talked about him. Patrick Mahomes. I picked him up, and I have him in one of my leagues, and he is literally lighting up my fantasy. I am now 2-0. Mahomes is carrying that team.
Not only do I think he's a top quarterback, I'm coming around on him as a first-round talent. For me personally, I didn't, and when we were talking about preseason, I didn't and wouldn't take a quarterback in the first round. I think Mahomes is so much different and better. And now you're seeing some of these older quarterbacks, the Roethlisbergers and the Breeses that are getting hurt in their older age. Not to say that age is the reason why they got hurt, but I would put Mahomes really in the top 5. If I was drafting a new team today, I would go ahead and take my first-round pick with Mahomes. But that's just me personally. Parker.
I put Brady at 2. Brady played first 2 weeks where he went off, and I was shocked with that. 3, I put Lamar Jackson because he really impressed people. I put Dak Prescott at 4, Aaron Rodgers at 5, Deshaun Watson 6, Russell Wilson 7. I put Case Keenum at 8. Case Keenum, he's on the team that's struggling right now, but he is putting up offensive points for the Washington Redskins. 9, I still have Phillip Rivers because everybody has a tough game. And 10, I'm going to round off with Jared Goff.
We have almost all the same people there. I have Mahomes. I still have Rodgers, number 2. I'm not ready to give up on Rodgers yet. They've played some tough defenses. I think things will get better for Rodgers. Watson at 3, Wentz at 4, Lamar Jackson at 5. I like Jackson, but I do believe that he really needs... I just don't see this keeping up for the entire season. Brian, I do have Prescott at 6, which this is a major improvement. I probably had him preseason at about 16. Very impressed. But that also had to do with Zeke not maybe being, who knows, but one of his major targets, Michael Gallup, got injured in the game yesterday. Had you heard any further insight about Gallup?
No, this is actually new news to me. Yeah, this is new news to me. I didn't know anything about this.
So the word on Michael Gallup is... they hope it's just a contusion from the Dallas Morning News. Doesn't sound terrible, but again, when you're talking knee injury, I think that's a significant issue there. Brady at 7, Russell Wilson at 8, Matt Ryan. Neither of you mentioned Matt Ryan here. Thought he looked pretty good in the game yesterday. You know, honestly, it looks like Calvin Ridley's really stepped up. And again, did throw 3 picks. I think that's the only issue for me is right now he's got 5 touchdowns, 5 picks against 2, middle-of-the-road defenses. But I still like Matt Ryan here, and number 10. I'm going to agree with you here, Parker. Case Keenum. Look, the Redskins, as a Redskins fan, I can say this, they're not good. And I think that's the reason why I have Keenum so high. It's because they're terrible. They're going to be playing from behind a lot. They're going to be passing a lot. And they actually do have some decent receivers that we've seen in the first couple of weeks. I'm really surprised here. Case Keenum is actually number 5 in fantasy points on the season. But here is another thing that when you're talking about the top 3, if in terms of fantasy points, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, all have nearly 20-plus points more than somebody like a Matthew Stafford or Carson Wentz. So, I mean, you're talking about an extra 10 points a week.
And another quarterback that I really debated putting on that list on my top 10, I got to give credit to Andy Dalton. For the Bengals that are playing, they had a rough 2 weeks. Andy Dalton is putting up points with John Ross and Tyler Boyd and that wide receiver core. They are doing fine without A.J. Green out. Now, don't get granted, their defenses win games. The Bengals may be 0-2, but Andy Dalton is so far looking really sharp.
The only concern I see with Dalton, and again, we're just talking first 2 weeks here, 1 pick, 2 fumbles. So that is not good. Did have 418 yards, 2 touchdowns at Seattle, which is very impressive. 3-11-2 during week 2 against San Francisco in an ugly loss.
Yeah.
I was really surprised how flat
they gave a good run against Seattle, and then they just got pounded by San Fran.
All right, well, we're going to move on to the running backs. We will talk about some of these other people. We are going to talk in a little bit about some waiver wire pickups, and I'm sure we're going to talk about some quarterbacks who you can target beyond the ones we've already discussed. All right, so we're going to move on to running backs. Parker, I'm going to start with you. Let's hear your top 10 running backs.
I got Saquon Barkley at 1, Zeke at 2, Kamara at 3, Austin Eckler at 4, Le'Veon Bell at 5, Gurley at 6, Derrick Henry at 7, Sony Michel at 8, Chris Carson at 9, and Mark Ingram at 10.
I like some of those. I'm concerned about Bell, and in fact, I've moved Bell out of my top 10. I still believe in a PPR league. He's right there. I am concerned. First game in nearly 17 months, comes out and has to get an MRI. Looks to be good to go for the Monday night game. And of course, we're saying this without having seen week 2 for the Jets, but I think the bigger issue here with Bell, Parker, is the fact that Sam Darnold is out. But then again, that could help. A new quarterback, throw it to maybe more carries for Bell, but also more out of the backfield, little screen passes.
He's one of the best running backs in the league when it comes out to that HB wheel route. So look, and like you said, with Sam Darnold being out, Le'Veon Bell might be getting some heavy low carries tonight.
So one person, did I not hear Derrick Henry on your list?
I do have Derrick Henry.
Okay.
He's 7.
Okay, I like Derrick Henry. He do be careful about his pass volume. Never been much to catch people out of catch balls out of the backfield. But so far, 19 carries, 15 carries against 2 average defenses, did very well. So I like Derrick Henry there. Also, it's a wait and see for me with Le'Veon Bell. Brian?
All right, I agreed with Parker putting Derrick Henry in there. I put Dalvin Cook from Minnesota, Eckler, Saquon, Barkley, Zeke, Le'Veon, Carson. David Johnson did not have a good game yesterday, but I mean, week 1 he had a very solid impact on that game. And then I put Kerryon Johnson in there as well.
I'm a big Kerryon Johnson fan. David Johnson didn't do much yesterday. I'm thinking it's because of the Baltimore defense.
He also left the game early. He got hurt, but he came back, but minimal impact.
Yeah, doesn't look too terrible. One of the people I haven't heard from the two of you...
You're going to say McCaffrey, aren't you?
No, Marlon Mack. Actually, third in rushing at this point. And doesn't Indy look better than you'd think without Luck?
I honestly am very surprised because I didn't think Jacoby Brissett is that good of a quarterback, but he is doing a good job and taking snaps. He's finding the receivers. Marlon Mack is doing good in the run game. And the Colts are a shocker. Like, a lot of people didn't think they were going to do good, but the first 2 weeks...
Well, when you look at how good their offensive line is, their defense has played well. Brissett hasn't played terribly, but T.Y. Hilton's had a big effort. Ebron with a touchdown yesterday. Jack Doyle in the passing game. I like Marlon Mack. I do have to tell you, Brian, I'm glad you mentioned Dalvin Cook. I have Dalvin Cook coming in at number 3. Number 2 in fantasy points from a running back in a big run yesterday. 2 100-yard games, 3 touchdowns, adding 5 catches out of the backfield. To me, I think Dalvin Cook has got a shot to be number 1 this year, and I know that's kind of going out on a limb. Saquon Barkley's also looked good, but again, their offense is just so poor.
Yeah.
I just don't see him having the amount of touchdowns. Again, I'm not on the Barkley bandwagon. I didn't get him in any leagues. But I'll tell you, Brian, the person that I'm the biggest fan of right now, Zeke Elliott, who I have coming in at number 2. Yesterday was a huge game. 23 carries, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Caught a couple out of the backfield. I think he's just locked in as a definite top 3 running
He had
back.
a slow start yesterday, but he got it together. And after the backup scored that touchdown, I think Zeke woke up because they took him out of it. And I got a little scared because I have Zeke in fantasy.
I have Cook 3, I have McCaffrey 4, Derrick Henry at 5. This is the highest I've ever been on Henry at this point. He just looks great, and their offense looks good. Chris Carson, still big on him. Interesting development yesterday on Carson. Penny had a big day yesterday. And what's interesting here about Carson is he is actually getting a lot more involved in the pass game, which I like to see.
In a PPR league, yes.
Because he's not even averaging 4 yards a carry. He's averaging 3.5, and with 46 yards and 60 yards. Does have a touchdown. In week 1, he had 2 touchdowns, but definitely chipping in with the pass. I'm hoping that next week in New Orleans and the following week at Arizona, Carson can break out. I'm actually kind of down on Kamara, and I love Kamara. I have him in almost every league. But yesterday really did not look well in the Sunday game against the Rams. Only 14 touches, had 20 the week before, only averaged 3.5 yards a carry. Yes, the Rams defense is stout. They are tough. Only one catch yesterday. Now, obviously, Brees being out, Bridgewater being in, I just don't know. And it also seemed to me like Latavius Murray was really taking away. I really think that they are going to try to limit Kamara's touches.
I think it's going to be more of a receiver thing because, I mean, you can't that receiving core is not really, when Brees is there, you can trust it. But with Teddy now, you're seeing Michael Thomas. He's going to be he's always facing number one corners. Traquan Smith is there. Traquan Smith, and then Ted Ginn Jr. I mean, otherwise, there's not much there.
Just sort of on the other end of the spectrum here, someone who I want to get your opinion on. I have him in a lot of leagues, gentlemen. This is sort of on the other end of the spectrum, outside of the top 10. Ronald Jones from Tampa was supposed to be the starter, went down to 4 carries. Week 1 had 13 carries, 75 yards, and added a catch for 18 out of the backfield, so had 10 points. But this week, 0.9 points, only had 4 carries for 9 yards.
Peyton Barber was the lead running back in the Thursday night game against Carolina.
So I think that after week 1, I just moved Jones to the moon because he was getting the carries. He almost 6 yards a carry week 1. And then I wonder, they made a comment. I don't know how closely you guys were watching the Thursday night game, but they made a comment from Bruce Arians saying that he is very, very, he's always been the type of person who sticks with the hot hand at running back. What are your thoughts there, Brian, when you have somebody like a Ronald Jones that's kind of part of a committee, but you don't really know what...
You honestly don't know. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it was like when at one point New Orleans had 3 running backs with Adrian Peterson, Mark Ingram, and Alvin Kamara coming in. It was really difficult, and unfortunately Adrian Peterson was the one that saw the bottom end of the stick on that. But
well, he did stare down Sean Payton and give him the evil eye.
Well, I mean, you're also competing with 2 other good running backs. So, I mean, someone unfortunately is going to get that unfortunate side. But, I mean, it's just tough. You never know what you really never know. I mean, you're going to see that all over.
Let's talk some other disappointments here, gentlemen. Is there a running back in your mind that you say that you're really disappointed with so far?
I was high on Damian Williams going into it. I mean, week 1 he had, I think, like 17 points. But then this past week, I think, had like 8 points. So, I mean,
9 carries for 8 yards and 3 for 48 in the passing game. So he's definitely contributing in the passing game, but definitely not what you drafted. I'm going to look up Mccoy here and see how Mccoy did yesterday. He's also questionable as well. Looks like he suffered an ankle injury, but he only had 2 point. Man, the Oakland Raiders really stopped the Chiefs running the ball. Maybe that's why Mahomes had to light it up and go for 440. Definitely very, very good point, Brian, about Damian Williams. I'll tell you who my biggest disappointment is thus far in terms of running back. Devonta Freeman, averaging 2.2 yards a carry across 2 weeks and only 6 catches.
Devonta Freeman hasn't, I mean, I think we can all agree on this. His production has really slowed down since the Super Bowl a few years back. I mean, I don't know what happened, if it's like, because he's not the oldest player. Like he's
only 27.
Yeah, it
seems like he's been in the league longer than that, though, doesn't it? Ito Smith, though, I think is what's interesting about Freeman. I think a lot of people who drafted Freeman took him because he was the guy.
Yeah, a couple years back, he was the number 1.
Ito Smith's averaging 6.3 yards per carry. Now, granted, in very small sample size, only 10 carries on the season, but to anyone who's watching the Eagles and Falcons game, Ito Smith was in there for the bigger, plays. So I wonder if, and it's the same thing with Penny and Carson. I think that to me, I think that's somebody, 2 different situations to keep an eye out for. One final thing before we move off running backs, Pittsburgh. I don't want to assume this because we don't know. Let's say James Conner is out. Who's the pickup there in Pittsburgh?
Well, before we go to that, my disappointment, Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's having a rough 2 weeks so far. He got injured, but for Pittsburgh, Benny Snell had the lead rushing in the game, but I feel like Pittsburgh's going to split time between Samuels and Benny Snell. Benny Snell, small school Kentucky, not known for football, but was a beast at Kentucky. They he went off against Penn State in the bowl game last year. Jalen Samuel didn't play too bad of a game when he played last year. So Snell's a rookie, so going to give him time to develop. But I do believe that Samuel would start over Snell.
Back to your point on Mixon, man, I didn't even realize this. He's averaging 1.6 yards a carry.
And it's hurting me in fantasy.
And has only had 5 catches across 2 weeks. That is scary. Mixon was almost a consensus top 15 pick.
And it stinks because I had last season, before our last podcast last season, I had high hopes for him this season. And week 1, he got stuffed and he got his ankle hurt. I was worried if I should start him or Giovanni Bernard this week because I picked up Giovanni because I was worried Mixon wasn't going to start.
To your point, though, Mixon was hurt, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Mixon definitely wasn't even supposed to play, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully he comes back. I got to tell you, though, I do think the Pittsburgh backfield, should Connor be out for a few weeks, I think that might be an interesting place to go if you're looking to pick up running backs. All right, we are going to take just a quick break, and we will be right back. We're going to talk wide receivers and tight ends, waiver wire pickups, and we're going to have a chance to walk back our Super Bowl picks. So we'll be right back with the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Christiana. Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide.
All right, we are back with the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide here with Brian Christiana, Parker Rose. This is Paul Miller. We are here in Season 3. This is episode number 2. We're going to take a look at wide receivers. We're going to talk about our top 10 wide receivers. We're going to go to tight ends, just a couple of surprise players, waiver wire pickups, and then we're going to take a final look at our Super Bowl picks and see how it's gone after 2 weeks. All right, let's get right into the wide receiver position. Wide receiver top 10. Let's hear what you got, Brian.
I put Julio in there, Marquise Brown from the Ravens, Gallup from Dallas, John Ross, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen. I included Juju. Miller, you'll like this one, Tyrell McLaurin from Washington. I put Godwin in from Tampa Bay after this good performance. And then for fantasy owners, a going would be Jameson Crowder.
Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting. Again, to your point, we haven't necessarily seen Crowder's matchup tonight, so we don't know. But that being said, I think Crowder definitely came out looking good week 1. Again, that might be an issue with simply because no Sam Darnold. So
yeah, we'll see.
I think that's going to be a concern. Parker, who do you have?
This was tough. I got Julio at 1, Michael Thomas 2, DeAndre Hopkins 3, Cooper Kupp at 4, Robert Woods at 5, Marquise Brown at 6, AB at 7, Juju at 8, Keenan Allen at 9, and I put Devontae Adams at 10.
And I have Michael Thomas, even with the Brees news, Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, and then number 4, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams 5. Here's one I didn't hear from you, gentlemen. Sammy Watkins.
I went week 1, very solid week. Week 2, not the best, but I mean not the worst.
He's the wide receiver right now, though.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I am simply doing it because Tyreek Hill is out, and there's no sense in when he's going to be back.
Oh, yeah.
Number 8, Antonio Brown. Number 9, Stephon Diggs. And number 10, Emmanuel Sanders.
Sanders had a good week.
Sanders is number 2 overall in fantasy points at the wide receiver position. Certainly people also out there, Chris Godwin, Kenny Galladay, and Nelson Aguilar are also people who could move up into my top 10, but I don't have them there now. There's a couple things that I wanted to mention there. Stephon Diggs, I really think week 1 didn't play well, but was hurt.
Week 2 started off really slow.
Yeah, I don't think he even had a catch until
like the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So, but I think Diggs, I'm still really, really high on Diggs. And frankly, I like Emmanuel Sanders. They don't really have a whole lot else there. Courtland Sutton.
Sutton had a good week 1, but week 2, it was same situation, like fourth quarter started getting some points.
But with Sanders, I mean, you know, 5 for 86 and a touch, 11 for 98 and a touch, back-to-back to 85 yards and up, and a touchdown and up, and 19.6 fantasy points and up for both. Definitely for both times. I was high on Sanders all year. I even in the preseason, I had mentioned that he should be a guy to target, and I think that he is somebody that absolutely should be on everybody's radar, and at this point, to me, is a must start. All right, now I want to go back to someone who we mentioned there, Antonio Brown. Guys, let's talk about this for a second. What a joke. How, now I'm hearing people on talk show hosts, which I suppose we are also talk show hosts if you want to look at it that way, talking about there potentially being collusion there. Now, I don't want to speculate that, and frankly, I don't know if that'll ever come out one way or the other, but how could this situation have been any weirder?
He outsmarted everybody. That's what it really was.
By losing $15 million guaranteed.
But he got what I'm just saying, he got what he wanted in the long run.
That's literally what I've been hearing.
Why did he sign with the Raiders only to leave? He signed an extension with the Raiders.
That's true.
He was fine at first, and then he realized that he wasn't getting what he wants. Because, if you look at his time as Pittsburgh, they didn't discipline him. John Gruden, you go to the Raiders, they don't take stuff like that. They're disciplined, and Brown didn't like that. So, of course, he's going to go make a scene, start trouble. And Raiders have no problem with releasing. They don't care if you're top.
Apparently not in Los Angeles.
No, I'm just saying, if it's the other way around, it's breaking news.
No, and I understand, but my biggest issue here is I'm really, and I guess, the Patriots do have a history of taking on troubled players.
Yeah, Randy Moss.
But and turning them around. But gosh, I just can't believe that Antonio Brown went through all this, and he did miss week 1, of course. But how do you guys feel? I mean, I have him at 8. Where did you have him again, Parker?
I have him at 7.
And Brian?
I didn't even put him on.
Not even in your top 10.
He played 1 week.
I mean, this is going forward. What are your expectations, Brian, of Antonio Brown?
What's my expectations? I don't think he's going to be playing a full season. I honestly don't think this. I think this whole thing with the trainer now is going to be worse than you think.
Well, so the one concern that about that, and from everything that I've heard,
the settlement thing,
it's because it's a civil case.
Yes,
and it wasn't brought up in criminal court, which I don't think was necessarily really clear when this first came out. So I guess the question would be, why would this have come from the civil court? And I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know if you guys have heard anything. Why is it coming out in civil court as opposed to criminal court? But I do know that apparently, probably as we speak, she is going to be the accuser is going to be meeting with the NFL, and so we'll get some insight.
Wasn't there also something that the league was investigating the Patriots getting Antonio Brown?
They should.
I mean, literally, my dad told me that they were investigating that because it is very kind of weird. You turn down.
First of all, not too many teams have $15 million in salary cap left over. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely don't.
No, and most teams don't. Most teams have very, very little salary cap left over. Okay, and the Patriots definitely. However, I don't know if they restructure people's contracts or what, but how he goes from being released to being signed within a matter of minutes. There's got to be more to the story.
You got a three-piece threat in New England. You got Edelman, Gordon when he's not getting in trouble, and you got Brown. Brady has friends.
There's no way. To me, that's the best 1, 2, 3 receiving core.
And by the end of it, Brady might be probably number 2. If not number 1, he'll be number 2 in fantasy because he has targets now. And, well, even then, Bill Belichick will go to your local grocery store and make a wide receiver out of someone.
Brady is number 4 in total fantasy points thus far this season.
And let's remember, Professor Miller, last year Brady wasn't even in the top 10 because of he had a bad fantasy last year. I was hesitant of drafting him this year. Well, guess what? I'm glad I started him and drafted him. He's looking phenomenal.
You were high on Brady this year. All right, let's move on to tight ends. This is an area where I think that we're going to see a lot of change. Now, I would imagine, I'm going to go on a limb and say that somewhere in our top 3, we have Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz.
Yep.
I think that's safe to say. And then probably Ingram right there after.
Ingram's in there. Delaney Walker's in there.
Delaney Walker, a pleasant surprise. So,
Mark Andrews.
I have, in almost every league I'm in, Delaney Walker because I waited very late. I couldn't get any of those top 3, and I waited and waited and waited, and I ended up getting Walker, and I'm very, very happy with Walker at this point. Not a big game yesterday, but still played well, and I'm happy moving forward with him. Right now, he's number 4 in fantasy points. Only had 8 yesterday, but I do think that Delaney Walker is gonna continue. Brian, who top 10 here?
Tight end wise, I put Witten in there. That Hawkinson from the Lions, I mean, this past game, I think he had 1.8 fantasy points, but the week before, What a solid performance. Jimmy Graham, not really good so far this season. I mean, I was really debating if I should give him a chance or not. Another big one that a lot of people are big on that is injured is Trey Burton from the Bears.
He hasn't played yet this season, has he?
No, he hasn't. O.J. Howard had a big fat 0 this past week all around.
I'm done with Howard. I think that because him and Cameron Brate are both there, I think that's going to be tough for Howard. And to be honest, that Tampa Bay offense looks terrible.
I mean, Hooper also can be put in there. There's a lot of good tight ends, though, this year. It's just so difficult, because you never know who's going to be consistent, who's not. I mean, you on the three... And I mean, Kittle didn't even have that great of a start. So I mean, you can only really rely on 3. Where you have Ingram, who seems like he's playing consistent. You have Kelsey, who's going to get you double digits every week, and Ertz.
Kittle only 3 targets in the game in week 2.
And that's the thing. Garoppolo didn't play last year when Kittle went off.
I think Garoppolo's intelligent enough to get him the ball.
Get him involved.
So very interesting. Number 1 after 2 weeks, tight end Mark Andrews. Really kind of came out of nowhere here, especially since Hayden Hurst was their first-round pick in 2018.
Thor, yeah.
Really surprising here. Mark Andrews stepped up. But that's sort of my issue is because Hayden Hurst is a former number 1 pick. They're not just going to bench him. They're going to...
He's their number 2. Mark Andrews could... Do you think he could end up like a Kelsey, where he's playing like the receiver /
A team, you have a receiver tight end, you have your blocking tight end. That's how the Steelers worked with Jesse James and Vance McDonald.
So I want to talk to you about my top 10 here. Obviously, Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, Ingram. I have Mark Andrews at 5. Here's one that a lot of people skipped on. Greg Olson. Greg Olson has looked good.
Last week was solid.
That said, Cam Newton looks awful.
Absolutely.
Like he looks terrible.
He's not healthy. I think Strip, he's just not healthy.
I think it's time to move on from him. Hooper I have. Now, you did say Witten. I know that's probably a homer pick.
That is a homer pick, yeah.
He's only got 8 targets on the season, which he does have 2 touchdowns. They do look for him near the end zone. If you are, to me, Witten at this point, and I'm not just saying this to bust your chops, but I think he's a bye-week fill-in. Yeah. I think if you have one of these top 5 to top 8, it's a bye-week, Witten, you could do a lot worse than Witten the way they look for him at the goal line.
Yeah.
All right. Parker, we're going to go back to you for the tight ends. So we talked about Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, Ingram, and Andrews. Who are some other people there maybe you have in the back half of your top 10?
So my top 4 is my top 3 is obviously top 4 Evan Ingram. I have Eric Ebron at 5. Like Jacoby Brissett quarterback, but Ebron is still surprisingly getting touches and catches. I got Hooper at 6, Delaney Walker at 7. I do have Greg Olson on my list because even though he's old and he's battling injury, I still feel like he still has things to do. 9, I have Mark Andrews at 9, and then 10 I also put Jason Witten. Like you and Brian said, Jason Witten is a good tight end at that goal line when you need a quick pass out. Jason Witten is your guy, and coming out of retirement, he's doing a fairly good job in my opinion.
I'm actually gonna. I hate saying this, and I think a lot of people had Ebron safely at that 5 spot there, right behind Ingram preseason. I'm getting away from Eric Ebron. In fact, if I have him, which I don't, but if I did, he's only caught 4 balls this year for 33 yards and a touch. Now, he did catch a touchdown, but I don't know if you saw the touchdown. It was a shovel pass. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even a normal pass route. I actually am high on Jack Doyle here. If you look now, again, Doyle has about the same stats. However, what's interesting about Doyle is when they played before, when Brissett played that year for Luck when he was hurt, Doyle had 70-plus catches that season. Honestly, if I'm you, I'm getting rid of Ebron anywhere I can. But then again, you got to make sure that you have a good backup. You don't just want to get rid of him. I will tell you somebody that I think that really, really could step up and continue to step up. Vance McDonald with 2 touchdowns yesterday on week 2. I think that Vance McDonald's a person that you might want to go and find. Now, he is rostered in 83% of leagues, but I do think that Vance McDonald could be clearly a top 10 tight end.
And I agree with that statement because Mason Rudolph coming in, another guy I would put in your... I would look at James Washington because Mason Rudolph, James Washington have that connection from OSU, Oklahoma State University, not Ohio State.
Well, I'm sure you were watching the game, Parker, and noticed that he had Washington wide open down the field,
and he missed them.
and just out of his hands. I mean, it was a huge play.
They did have a nice flea flicker though, the Juju Smith-Schuster. That was a nice trick play. I think that capped the game, at least a positive side.
Some other people that worth noting here, again, back to O.J. Howard. I mean, you really can't start off any worse than he started off, taking a 0 and 4 catches for 32. Really just surprised how poorly he has played so far. But yeah, so I think that there's some people to be had here. I have, again, Olson, Walker, Hawkinson, Waller from the Raiders, and Austin Hooper coming in at number 10. But honestly, if you're getting beyond the Delaney Walkers of the world, you are in some trouble. Now, I also play in leagues, Parker, that you don't have to play a tight end as well. So it really just depends what your league setup is. I know some people that play 2 tight end leagues. So, but
that's tough.
But I do think Witten, with the way the Cowboys' offense is going, I do think Witten would be somebody interesting to at least consider. All right, we're going to go to the waiver wire pickups now. So Brian actually has to step out here in just a minute, but I did want to give Brian an opportunity to talk about some waiver wire pickups, which we'll move on to, and then Parker and I can finish with talking about some of the surprise players.
I have 2 of your guys, Miller. I have McLaurin from the Redskins. Trey Quinn from the Redskins I put on there as well. Very high on him.
Definitely in a PPR league.
Yes.
Not so much standard, but PPR for Trey Quinn, yeah, I can buy that.
Singletary from Buffalo.
And that's, I mean, I guess it's not really surprising. I want to see how much he's owned.
And then I also put Hardman from Kansas City.
So Devin Singletary is rostered in 82% of leagues, but he's also potentially injured.
Yeah.
As well as hamstring injury. So, I mean, if that's a pulled hamstring, he's going to be out for a few weeks. I wonder who's going to back him up. Frank Gore, I'm telling you. So, if you're looking for someone to pick up, Frank Gore, even with that yesterday, had 19 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown for 16.3 points.
I think
Frank Gore
seems like he never gets old.
I know.
I love that Trey Quinn guy.
Yeah, he's excellent. And again, back to our earlier point with Case Keenum, the Redskins are not going to be ahead. They are going to have to throw the ball. And now without Darius Geis, who's to this point been sort of a bust, I mean, I guess you can't really call him a bust because he's been hurt. I mean, he looked okay, even though he only ran for 18 yards in week 1. But I got to tell you that I definitely think you have some interesting people there. All right.
And then, of course, my Super Bowl predictions, Dallas and Cleveland, we're about 50% there. My NFC team, I'm confident. AFC.
All right, well, we will catch Brian on the October edition of Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. You know, I'll tell you what. I don't know how you have them grouped, Parker, but I kind of have couple quarterbacks, couple running backs, couple wide receivers. Did you kind of do the same type of way?
I actually went heavy on QBs because it seems like a lot of quarterbacks are getting injured early in the season. I do have Rashad Penny because some people didn't pick him up, and like we mentioned earlier, Carson looks like he's going to be the passing running back, and it looks like Penny might eventually get the carries. Is Seattle going to end up splitting? Because it seems like that Russell Wilson ain't rushing as much as he used to anymore. They finally got the confidence in running backs because they haven't had one since Marshawn Lynch and also Sean Alexander. So seeing that you got 2 really good young running backs in the backfield, which is good to see for Seattle. Because I had Penny on my bench, and he did really well yesterday.
So Penny's rostered in 67.6%, but what's interesting about that, Parker, is that over the last week, he had actually been dropped in about 15% of leagues. I would wonder why that was. Probably just because he didn't do much. Maybe people were drafting him. But to me, if you're the Chris Carson owner in a league, you really have to have Penny.
That's why I drafted him, because Chris Carson, he did get hurt last year. And Rashad Penny did take carry loads, and he put up points. So it's good to have that security blanket just in case, because the NFL these days, injuries are a lot more current now in the NFL these days. So gotta watch.
I mean, even in the Eagles-Atlanta game, how many people got hurt? From Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Wentz went out for a little bit. I mean, who knows? I think that was very interesting.
And Deshaun Jackson, it's a big blow to the Eagles' offense because he went off in week 1. he had a phenomenal. I think he put up 30-some points in week 1, if I'm not mistaken, because I had him on my bench.
So here's just some quarterbacks that I'm looking at, and then you can chat also. Jimmy Garoppolo is at 25%, Matt Stafford at 26%, and Case Keenum. This blew my mind, Parker. 5% owned. Ooh. Case Keenum. Again, I think he's not a sexy pick to put up a ton of points each and every week, but I think he's an NFL quarterback. He's a veteran, and I guess really your only issue with Case Keenum is that you'd figure at some point Dwayne Haskins is going to start. But if you're, let's say for Brees, you need to cover 6 weeks or so, maybe he gets you a couple of weeks before Haskins starts. But I'd actually probably go with Garoppolo or Stafford.
Honestly, and what you said about I just lost my train of thought. The quarterback that we just been wrenching about,
Keenum.
Keenum, yeah. People that don't believe in Keenum, they think that he's a backup quarterback at best. But when he started in Minnesota, he kicked them to the playoffs. He played phenomenal. They just lost in the end. He goes to Washington. Look, he's on a team that's having a build in the rough, but he's playing phenomenal football.
I'm just so disappointed in the Washington defense. That was supposed to be the strength of their team, and the Cowboys just really, they didn't stop anybody.
And they got leadership like Josh Norman, and he got beat on how many plays? Like he was
Norman's terrible.
He was beaten embarrassingly. Like they showed videos on Facebook of him getting beaten embarrassingly. But like I said though, like with a lot of quarterbacks being injured, I won't overlook Josh Allen. Andy Dalton, like I said, yes, he's on a team that's having a rough season, but I think I'm high on Andy Dalton right now.
Andy Dalton only at 9.8% owned. I would imagine that's going to go way up. I think some of these fringe quarterbacks, even, you know what? I got to tell you, even Jacoby Brissett has been viable only at about 12%. Now, he hasn't put up a ton of yards, but 5 touchdowns, only 1 interception thus far. And the Colts don't look bad. Again, I probably wouldn't necessarily go there particularly, but I do think that he's at least got a shot. And when you look down, Deshaun Watson, a bad game week 2, yeah. Cam Newton, a bad week 2. I mean, now you're getting into the Kirk Cousins of the world and maybe Teddy Bridgewater, but man, quarterback, and that's why I was really talking earlier, Parker, about the importance of having a quarterback and how great Mahomes is right now because of the issues at quarterback. It's quarterback's really probably been the toughest position.
But also Mahomes gave people a scare because he did get hurt in week 1. He was battling was his ankle or was it his foot? That's why you gotta watch quarterbacks. Like that's why I said, look, Mason Rudolph's gonna get a first real start. I have high hopes for the new rookie. Well, not a rookie no more, but I have hopes for him as well. Like the rookie quarterback for Jacksonville too. He played good in his first 2 games. Josh Allen, another not bad overlook. And also, the backup running back for San Fran didn't look too bad either. With their starter being out.
Raheem Mostert.
Yes.
He is actually, I had in a couple of DraftKings leagues yesterday that definitely played well. Mostert's only, as we moved to running backs, he's only at 11% owned. The big one here, and hopefully you don't steal my thunder in our league, Frank Gore. Gore is going to be the guy that I get because I think that if you are looking for example, I mentioned earlier Ronald Jones. I have Ronald Jones in a lot of leagues. I'd rather take Gore at this point than Jones because at least with Gore, you know what you're going to get. Here's another one I want to run by you. Carlos Hyde in Houston. 20 carries in week 2. Now, he's 44% owned, but he is going to be the lead back in a good offense.
I really like Carlos Hyde. I liked him where he was. He's a talented back that's now getting the opportunity that I believe he deserves, and I wish him the best in Houston. And Houston has, when Deshaun Watson's on, you have a great offense there. You got Carlos Hyde back here, and you got DeAndre Hopkins as a wide receiver. So Bill O'Brien as your head coach. So if they wake up from where week 2 struggles, I think I actually see Houston in a good fight in the playoffs in the future.
They have not looked good so far this season,
not
I have
at
to
all.
tell you. But I'll tell you, there's one other person, Parker, that I really wanted to kind of put the word out for. Now, he is over 50% owned. He's at 51%. Chris Thompson is a guy that I absolutely go and get. And here's why. He is going to be basically the feature Washington back. Geis is supposed to be injured for about 6 weeks to get back from this meniscus repair. And Adrian Peterson really didn't do a whole lot of anything, and he's definitely not involved in the pass game. Chris Thompson should be good for 8 catches, 70 yards, and maybe a touchdown every other week. I mean, that's 15 points. Remember, the bye weeks are going to be starting before you know it. Week 4 are the first bye weeks. So, you got to make sure that you're developing some depth to your team. And if nothing else, before we get out of these waiver wires, I do have a couple of wide receivers I wanted to chat about. You have to back up and handcuff your running backs. Not to say you shouldn't at wide receiver as well, but if you do not have, for example, if you have Todd Gurley and you do not have Malcolm Brown, or you have Kamara and you don't have Latavius Murray, or Dalvin Cook and Madison, or, et cetera, Breida and Mostert, Jones for the Packers and Jamal Williams, et cetera, right on down the line, please make sure that this week is the week to go get them, because people are dropping like flies.
Yeah, injuries are getting, it's only week 2, and there's a lot of injuries. There's players getting injured at week 1, and I can't stress it enough. Like what Professor Miller said, when you do your bench, don't look at tight ends, don't look at kickers, don't look at defense. Look at the quarterback and wide receivers and running backs, because I guarantee you're going to need them. I already have a lot out from injury, and I have a couple wide receivers out from injury, so I am claiming waivers left and right now in multiple leagues.
Just as a look at running back in the top, let's say 50, here's people who came out of yesterday's games injured. Damian Williams, Devin Singletary, James Conner, Le'Veon Bell is still nursing a shoulder, LaShawn McCoy. Those are some really big people who just after week 2 are already injured. So again, and one final thing, we talked a lot about Austin Eckler, and he moved way up the draft board. Justin Jackson, you have to have him.
Melvin Gordon, who?
I would, Gordon said he's not coming back to November. I'd say at that point, if you're rostering Melvin Gordon, more power to you, because I just don't see him having fantasy relevance.
I'm a firm believer, because the way Austin Eckler played good in his first 2 weeks, he deserves to keep getting these starts. And when if Melvin Gordon comes back, it's not fair to Austin Eckler, because he came in, he's like, I'm gonna have to fill in this role. All right, I got the offense, and he is sharing his share for the San Diego offense.
So just before we get out of here, there's just a couple final people, and if you have any other people here, please chime in as well. I did talk about McLaurin, 44% owned. He should be 80% owned. Here's somebody that I really think that people need to take a look at. Nelson Aguilar or JJ Arcega-Whiteside with a cloud of mysteriousness over the number 1 and number 2 receivers, wide receivers. Of course, Ertz is there as well. In the Eagle offense, I look for, and Aguilar had a great week too. Arcega-Whiteside, he dropped the pass.
Nelson Aguilar dropped a couple, but from his rookie year, Nelson Aguilar is a talented wide receiver. Yes, was he the third wide receiver because of Deshaun Jackson being back, and Alshon Jeffrey is the slot, or is there's Deshaun Jackson in the slot.
They mix it up. Usually it's Aguilar in the slot, but Jackson will run some plays out of there too.
But another person I'll look at on that Eagles offense, I don't know how much he's owned, but I'll look at Miles Sanders. They have high hopes for that running back out of Penn State, and I watched Miles Sanders, and I really think he did a good job for Penn State when Barkley left. So I don't know how much he's owned in the league, but if he's not highly owned, I would consider picking up Miles Sanders.
Miles Sanders is at 85%, but he went down from 90 the previous week, so people were already dropping him. Now, only averaging 2.5 yards a carry, so not necessarily a starter. But Jordan Howard didn't look all that great either. And yeah, they have Sproles, but I think long-term Sanders is the guy, especially if you're in a keeper dynasty.
I agree 100%.
One final person on the waiver wire, DJ Shark from Jacksonville, only 22% owned, top 20 in terms of overall fantasy points at wide receivers. So I got to tell you, this is a make or break week for a lot of people, because remember, buys start in week 4, so you have to make sure that be careful who you're dropping, but also take a look to the future for some of these people. Jimmy G, Case Keenum, Stafford, Mostert, Gore, Hyde. Those are people that you want to be picking up, and Nelson Aguilar too. Although, Parker, if you had to narrow it down to 2 people that you think that everybody should go out there and get, who would it be?
On the waivers, honestly, like I said, quarterback's getting hurt. You need to watch out. I say I would go after the backup for Jacksonville, and also, like you said, Frank Gore or Carlos Hyde. You need running backs.
Love it.
Or Nelson Aguilar.
I'm going to say, again, I'm in a situation where I need to pick up a quarterback. I'm actually going to be going out and getting Matt Stafford. I like Raheem Mostert. But if it's, for me, it's got to be Stafford and Carlos Hyde would be the 2 I would pick up. But it really just depends what you need. All right, well, we are going to come to the final segment. We will always revisit our Super Bowl picks. We're going to start off with me. Saints and Chargers here. Oh, boy, I don't know. The Chargers looked awful yesterday. The Saints, they didn't look good. But I think my biggest concern with the Saints is obviously not having Drew Brees, 6 weeks out. It's going to maybe be week 10 till he comes back. Are they going to be out of it at that point?
Let's just see what Teddy Bridgewater could do. Like, don't get me. I like Teddy Bridgewater. Like, he was okay in Minnesota. He became a backup. You always got to love a good backup quarterback. So look at Nick Foles for an example. Case Keenum for an example. Don't count backup quarterbacks out.
Well, and the thing is, too, is Bridgewater really hadn't spent much time with the ones. I think with a week of practice and hopefully a better game from Alvin Kamara, I think the Saints have the opportunity to at least tread water. And
also, if Teddy starts having a rough game, Hill is not a bad third-string quarterback.
Yeah, you could do a lot worse than Taysom Hill. Parker, you have the Eagles and the Chargers. Since we both have the Chargers in common, what are your thoughts about the Chargers thus far and how they've looked?
Last week, they took a tough loss. Chargers, I think they're a great team, but the problem is I feel like they play down sometimes to their opponents. Phillip Rivers, he's underrated. A lot of people don't see him as a talented quarterback. I think Phillip Rivers is a very good quarterback. He is great. He has Keenan Allen with wide receiver. He has Eckler in the backfield. They have a good offense, and they have I'd say a very good defense. You got Joey Bosa, and they got a great secondary. Yes, you're going to take losses here and there, but I still feel like the Chargers are going to do something. Like, they're going to be a dark horse, and the underdogs in the playoffs if they make it, but don't count them out.
Here's the problem that I'm seeing, and I should have maybe thought about this a little bit better when I made these picks. Because the Chiefs are so good, I think that it's going to be a wild card or bust for the Chargers. Like, they're going to have to, obviously, if you get that first round bye and, win your division, it's going to be tricky for them to win the division with the way that the Chiefs are playing. Definitely I got to tell you, probably at this point, the NFC West looks to me the most interesting with the Rams, Niners, and Seahawks all 2-0, and the Cardinals are 0-1-1.
So they're not that far back either.
No.
How about that, though? The last 2 seasons in a row, we had a tie.
There were multiple ties last year.
Yeah, but it's cool how back-to-back seasons we started. They didn't have that in a long time.
Okay. Now, what about the Eagles? What are your thoughts there?
Took a really bad loss last night. You lost, and the injuries. I think the injuries killed Deshaun Jackson going down and Alshon Jeffrey, 2 talented wide receivers that Wentz uses. Wentz got hurt a bit. Zach Ertz wasn't as much as a function last night, which is not good because that's his bread and butter.
And Dallas Goedert
and also Miles Sanders was getting stuffed in the backfield. So I'll give credit to Atlanta for playing good defense, but if the Eagles they need to hope that their injuries are not as bad because Nelson Aguilar, he's not a bad wide receiver, but he does drop a lot of passes. I'm not counting the Eagles out yet, but that way how Dallas' schedule's looking, Dallas has a talented offense and defense. So it's going to be tough for the Eagles to beat their division rivals.
I got to tell you, I'm not impressed at all with the Eagles. They got off to a really slow start against Washington in their home opener. Then they lost. Yes, it was on the road, but you have to figure a lot of people are thinking that the Falcons are going to be in the mix too. So to drop that game, then next week they got to play the red-hot Detroit Lions. Then they go at Green Bay, home for the Jets, at the Vikings, at the Cowboys, and at the Bills. I mean, gosh, this has got to be one of the toughest, and obviously it should be, but one of the toughest schedules in football.
Well, let's be honest here, Professor Miller. the NFL back a couple of years, like 5 years ago, it predicted who's going to the playoffs. Now, you don't know who's going. You could have anybody in the play. Like right now, the Browns are still talk. Ravens are surprising a lot of people. A lot of people didn't think the Ravens were going to be a talented team. People are like, Lamar Jackson's a bust. He's going to run the whole time. Lamar Jackson
looks great.
He looks phenomenal. Like, yes, granted, he played Miami and Arizona, but they're NFL teams. It don't matter.
I agree.
It does not matter at all.
Okay, so after that stretch of the 3 away games, Vikings, Cowboys, Bills, then they play, listen to this, the Eagles, the Bears, the Patriots, and the Seahawks. I mean, this is ridiculous. And yes, they do have the Dolphins and Giants, Redskins, Cowboys, and then Giants again. So actually 2 of their last 4 weeks, they do play the Giants. So the end of the season, mostly division. But, man, the Eagles, it's going to be tough. Brian is still in on the Cowboys. I think I am too. I'm impressed with the way the Cowboys have played.
I dislike the Cowboys, but I have to go with it. And Brian, I'll give him credit. He deserves to see his team go to the Super Bowl. He hasn't seen it. Dallas has talent, and honestly, if we could see a Patriots Dallas Super Bowl,
I think that would be something.
I think that would be a
NFL
great Super Bowl. But I do believe that if that's the case, I think Dallas will beat New England too. I think Dallas has the better team. And I think, how much I don't like it, I think it's time for Dallas to get their 6th ring.
I will tell you before we get out of here, Brian also has the Browns. Now, obviously, again, as we mentioned, we are recording this on Monday just after week 2, so we have not been able to see the Browns. But looking forward, we saw them week 1.
They looked terrible. Baker Mayfield looked horrible. OBJ... He got called out for a watch, and because he wasn't getting.
What was that about?
I have no clue. Shannon Sharp called him out on it, right?
Well, the league called him out on it too.
Like, and it's a shame, like how bad they got beaten by the Titans in Week 1, because Cleveland has a talented offense, and their defense is better too.
Here's the problem, Parker. Again, we don't know, but let's say they come out and they don't look good again at the Jets. Guess what? Their next 3 games: Rams, at Ravens, at 49ers. Listen to this. Home for the Seahawks, at Patriots, at Broncos. I mean, gosh, is there a winnable game in there? I mean, obviously the Jets game, but gosh, they could start off 1-5.
Yeah, the Ravens are red hot. You can't. Marquise Brown can't. Rams just have a good coaching staff and a good team in general. They might have a shot against the 49ers, but like I said, Jimmy G came off his. I'm not high.
Traveling across country though.
I'm not high on Jimmy G, but Jimmy G come off injury. He's not looking bad.
No, he's not. I'm all in on Garoppolo.
Now with the Patriots, I think Tom Brady's gonna go. You got 3 wide receivers in that court. You could not throw the Brown, but Edelman and those quick slants, you cannot stop them.
So, are you happy with your picks? Eagles and Chargers for the Super Bowl?
For now, I'm still...
You gonna stick with them?
It's only week 2, because you never... Like I'm sounding like a broken record. Injuries could change outcomes.
Of course. Honestly, it would be tough for me to not at least say that the Cowboys, to me, are the most impressive team in the NFC. Now, I'm not going to say that they're going to go to the Super Bowl, but definitely the most impressive. And the Chargers really have started off slow. I'm really going to look to see what they're doing in week 3.
But didn't they start off slow last year and they picked it up? So I'm not going to count them out, because some teams just need a little kick to get going.
Very true.
And that's why, even though Pittsburgh's down a lot of players, let's just wait and see. Maybe there's some magic.
Mason Rudolph magic.
Let's see what Mike Tomlin could do, because
this is his last shot.
I literally think if Pittsburgh has a horrible season, I think the Rooneys are finally going to say, we're done with you. I honestly, if it's up to me, I would fire the whole coaching staff.
Yeah,
our defensive coordinator's terrible. For how much I dislike Todd Haley, I still think he was a better offensive coordinator than who we have now.
I agree. Well, Parker, that's going to bring us to the end of the podcast. Hopefully everybody was able to use this to have a good draft, and hopefully they can use some of our waiver wire pickups to continue. We will be back in October. We will be with you once a month for the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. Parker, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show and your insights.
Oh, I enjoy being on this. I'm glad that we could try helping people out and have a good time talking about football.
We'll continue to do it in the future. So look back in October for our next episode. But until then, this is Paul Miller for Parker Rose and Brian Christiana for the Fantasy Football Strategy Guide. We'll see you in October, and best of luck in Week 3.
Never get a soul.